Today we're going to be focusing on biodiversity and classification. Now, I'm sure if you guys are wondering, why are we studying this, biodiversity and classification? But let's first break down those two terms. So biodiversity, bio means living things, and diversity means variety or a large amount of organisms that are different from each other. Okay, and then we have classification. Classification refers to the grouping and sorting of things according to similarities and their differences. All right. Now, that's going to be key in our process of uncovering how scientists actually classify organisms according to their similarities and their differences. And then another important terminology that we have to know is that taxonomy. So what is taxonomy? Taxonomy refers to the science of naming and classifying a wide range of living things. So like I just said, a wide range of living things refer to diversity, and living things are biological, all right? So that's what we're going to be looking at. And life forms are put into groups as a result of classification. This makes it easier for the scientists to study these life forms. All right, so if you think of a lot of the life forms that we see today, they've all been named and given names in order for us to identify what this living organism does and how it actually functions based on the name that has been given to them. So that's what scientists did, and they followed this process of taxonomy and classification. Now, somebody that does taxonomy is called a taxonomist, all right? They are called a taxonomist. So let me just write it down here. Taxonomist, okay, that's wrong. Taxonomist, okay. So that is somebody that studies or does taxonomy. Okay, are we together? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So there were a large number of other scientists that classified living organisms. So we're just going to briefly unpack a bit of history as to how organisms came to be named, etc. So up until the middle of the 19th century, the physical appearance of the organisms was used as a criteria to classify organisms. Okay, so literally just based on how an organism looked like in their physical appearance, scientists figured out a way in order to distinguish this particular living thing from another living thing. Also, the anatomy of different organisms were studied, and organisms were placed into groups depending on similarities and their differences. So in this process, so they used anatomy. What is anatomy? Refers to the overall body structure of the living thing. And it was dependent on, are they similar to one another or are they different to one another? And how did they then distinguish them by naming them? All right, so comparative anatomy was no longer the only criteria used in classification of living organisms. So up until that point, they just compared living organisms according to what they look like. And then later on, however, from the study of paleontology and embryology, now paleontology is the process or the study of fossils, right? So you get different types of fossils that are found in deep layers, right? And we have embryology. Embryology refers to the study of embryos, okay? In the reproduction process, embryology, they study embryos, basically. Any living thing that is being developed, they study them. And then we have evidence from genetics and physiology. So genetics is just the study of genes and inheritance, and then physiology refers to the physicality of a living thing. And it became important for classification in the 20th century. So the use of evidence from molecular biology and genetics was also used in the middle of the 20th century and the beginning of this century. All right, so we are currently in the 21st century. So that is, so then there were two guys. Okay, so there was a guy named Aristotle and Carl Linnaeus. All right, so they gave rise to the modern classification system. So Aristotle lived between 384 to 322 BCE and classified living organisms into two groups. So the two main groups, so if you look at living organisms, they were classified into two main groups. So if something is living, they needed to identify, is this living thing a plant or an animal? So that's the broadest classification that you can give living things. It all traces back to whether this organism is a plant or is it an animal. All right, so that's what they came up with a while back. All right, and this is plants, and then there we have animals. Okay, so then Carl Linnaeus, or his actual full name was Carolus Linnaeus. All right, so he developed, what he developed was, he was a Swedish botanist and who lived during the 18th century, and his system of classification is still actually used today. Right, so Linnaeus and other scientists used Latin because it was a dead language, meaning nobody spoke it anymore. So during the 18th century, they needed to find out what language can they use that is not being used in order for people to not get confused with identifying an organism. All right, so think of it like this. We are in South Africa, and what are common languages that we know? So we know English, we have 11 languages, and so then they needed to find a language that nobody uses anymore in order to name organisms so that we don't get confused, all right? So we have 11 languages, so it needed to be a language that nobody is using and that nobody would understand, so that a name can be given for a living organism. Okay, so that actually makes sense if you think about it. And then what he invented was a two-part naming culture called binomial nomenclature. Okay, so binomial means two. Okay, some of you are doing mathematics, you will know that a binomial consists of two terms, and then nomenclature, that is just the name that was given, the technique that was given for this naming technique that was given. All right, so it's a two-part naming culture, and this is going to be important. You guys must remember binomial nomenclature as one of his technique for classifying organisms. Okay, so the system of giving each type of organism a genus and a species name. Okay, sorry. There we go again. There we go. Right, so genus and species name. So here we have a genus and a species name. So genus name will be written with a capital letter, while the species name is written with a small letter. Okay, so this is following the Latin format of giving names. All right, so we must adhere to this technique. Okay, so the genus and species, the genus can be written, but it must be a capital letter, and the species name can be written, but it must be all small letters. Okay. That is the requirements of this two-part naming culture. But I will give you guys examples of what I mean by that. All right. So, and then later on, he also developed a classification system called the taxonomic hierarchy. Okay, so hierarchy means from strongest to weakest, or if you look at a pyramid, right? So the pyramid, we just did actually, we did food pyramids and energy pyramids. So there's a hierarchy, so there's levels to how organisms are arranged. All right, so this taxonomic hierarchy, so taxonomic refers to a wide variety of organisms and being classified according to their similarities and the difference. So, which has 7 ranks from general to specific. Okay, so we start off generally and then it becomes more specific. So these taxonomic hierarchy consists of 7. So the first one is kingdom. Okay, so after you have distinguished a living organism as to whether it is a animal or a plant, you then later have to find out what kingdom they are from. So if we're looking at a plant, if we're looking at kingdom of plant or an animal, then that is very general, right? And then we need to be more specific as to what organism are we identifying, right? So here, kingdom is the broadest one, so that would be whether it is Plantae or Animalia, and then phylum falls under kingdom, and then we have class, order, family, genus, and species. Okay, so you guys can find out what mnemonic would serve you best in order to remember this, because you guys have to know the taxonomic hierarchy. So there are some ways that you can actually remember this, right? So you can have kids prefer candy over fresh green salad, or King Philip came over for good spaghetti, right? Or my personal favorite, I always remember, I say kings play cards over family gravestones. Okay, so it is K, P, C, O, F, green, and O, F, G, and S. Okay, so how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is the taxonomic rank that we use today in order to classify organisms, okay? Especially when new species are being discovered. They first need to find out if it is a plant, an animal, under which phylum will it belong to, according to similarities and differences, classes. So let's look at some examples of that, right? So here, for example, we know what this is, right? This is a tiger. Okay, now let's figure out what is its, how was this tiger classified, right? So obviously, if we look at kingdom refers to, it can either be Plantae or Animalia, right? So under which kingdom will it fall under? So this tiger falls under the kingdom of Animalia because it is considered to be an animal, all right? And then phylum, we're getting more specific when we are looking at phylum. So phylum is singular for the word phyla. Okay, so many phyla. Okay, I'm just gonna write it over here. Many phyla and one phylum. Okay, so that is key to understand. So there can be many phyla, and then we need to choose which one is the most accurate in terms of classifying the organism. So in this case, a tiger falls under Animalia and its phylum is Chordata. Okay, so the Chordata comes from the word chord, and it refers to animals that have a backbone. And animals that have a backbone are considered to be vertebrates, okay? And animals without a backbone are considered to be invertebrates. So a backbone is your vertebral column. So we as mammals, we are considered to be vertebrates because we have a backbone, and that's why they fall under the phylum of Chordata. Okay, because this is considered to be a mammal. All right, it will actually provide for its offspring by breastfeeding them. All right, the same way that humans do. And then under phylum, so that is Chordata, so it's still quite general. And then we will look at class. Now, class falls under phylum, all right? And in this case, class is Mammalia, okay? So mammals that that basically explains the tiger because it is a mammal, all right? It's able to take care of their young by breastfeeding, by providing milk, okay? And then order is carnivora, okay? So you'll get herbivora. So in this case, the tiger is considered to be a meat-eating organism, okay? It only eats meat, so it is carnivora. So that would be order. And then you even have suborders. And by the way, you can even have subclasses in order to specify an organism more accurately. So suborder is Anuroidae, and then okay, so I'm not really sure what this means, but this is like a suborder, and there's probably many suborders according to the classification system. And then we have family. So family, under which family does it belong? So it belongs under the family of Felidae, okay? Felidae, right? So that is almost similar to felis or feline, which comes from, we know the family of feline is like referring to cats, right? And we know that tiger is a cat. And then we have a subfamily, so there can be sub classes or subcategories under each taxonomic rank, okay? So then subfamily, it is Pantheraceae. So a tiger has characteristics of a panther, okay? We all know what a panther is. So a panther, so then it falls under that subfamily in order to make it more accurate. And then the last two, okay, so the second last taxonomic hierarchy or taxonomic rank is genus, and the last one is species. Okay, so genus, we will then refer to this genus and species name as a means by which we will name them according to Carl Linnaeus's two-part naming system. Okay, so this genus is Panthera, and then the species is Tigris, okay, or Tigris. Okay, now notice how it needs to be written. So Panthera, Tigris, can you see that when it is handwritten, it needs to be underlined first of all, and according to the two-part naming culture, the genus name will have a capital letter. So the word Panthera will start with a capital letter, and then the genus name will be written in just small letters, okay? So this is very important. And you guys are not going to be typing this name out in the exam, because you guys are going to have physical folio paper to write. So you must write it down. And if it's written down, it must be underlined, okay? So don't forget this process of naming, following the requirements of the binomial nomenclature, okay? So type, it does not have to be lined because it's going to be written in italics, okay? If you are typing out the name. So for example, if you're writing an article or you're writing a thesis, then when you're referring to animals and you want to give them scientific name, you will have to follow italics, okay? Right, so let's continue. So yeah, so that's how they have actually classified a tiger, right, according to the taxonomic hierarchy or its ranks, all right? Okay, so another example, this is what we call a nested system, which is not, so a nested system, so here are more examples of basically the taxonomic hierarchy. So let's example say humans, right? What are humans? Humans are considered to be, we fall under the kingdom of animals, right? Because we are not plants. And phylum, what phylum we are also considered to fall under phylum Chordata. And Mammalia is the class which we fall under. And then in contrast to the order was Carnivora. And our order is primates, okay? Because in evolutionary terms, scientists believe that we come from primates, right? Primates are basically ape-like, have ape-like features, because somehow we are similar to apes. But remember, that is controversial because not everyone believes that to be a fact. So it's just a theory. But let's continue and not digress. So then we have family. So under the family of Hominidae. Okay, so Hominidae, and then the genus is Homo. Okay, Homo. So that's the genus name. Homo means the same. Okay, and then species, we fall under the species of Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens. Okay, so we are referred to as, our scientific name as humans are Homo sapiens. Okay, so just to make sure that we are on track here, let me just check something here. Okay, yeah, no, we're still good. All right, so, and then chimpanzees. Okay, so how are we different from chimpanzees? So they are Animalia chordata. Mammalia, they're also considered to be primates, and however their family is different. They are Pongidae, and their genus is Pan, right? And the species is Troglodytes. Okay, so we differ from chimpanzees according to this system, classification system, right? So we are quite different from one another. Yeah, so that is the contrast, okay, between chimpanzees and humans. All right, so here's some more examples. Okay, so this image is not very clear. However, you guys have these notes as resources, so you can go look at them. But yeah, I'm sure you guys are good with the examples that are given. So for example, how are humans different from an ostrich? You can look at the classification systems over there. All right. Now, what's very important is that we're going to be doing some activities we're going to do our own activities in order to classify organisms, okay? And that's going to be done in the form of giving keys, okay? So there are two types of, we call them taxonomic keys. Okay? So there are two types. So we can have a pictorial key. Pictorial comes from the word picture. So these keys have illustrations, and these illustrations may be in the form of pictures, photographs, or combination of these, right? So we can have exercises where we'll be looking at pictures, and then we will be able to distinguish between various pictures on what organism are we actually looking at based on based on how they are classified. Okay, so organisms are identified by comparing them to the illustration. So they'll have illustrations. So as you can see here, this is not the best image. However, here we have a whole key over here. So there's quite a few keys, and you'll see all these illustrations, okay, and then they can guide us to actually finding out. It can lead us to a certain organism, okay. But we're going to do exercises in those. So for now, just know that there's pictorial keys, and then there's the next one. Okay, so let's evaluate this further. Pictorial keys. Okay, yeah, the next one is verbal. Sorry, the next one would be a verbal key. Okay. A verbal key. So verbal, another word for verbal is, okay, I'll explain that later on. So verbal, the clues are in the form of statements or questions or characteristics, right? So if you want to find out from these statements, all right, or questions, what is the key leading us to which animal, or what would be the animal that this key is leading us to, okay? So it needs to lead us to a certain conclusion on finding what type of animal we have discovered according to the keys, okay? But we're going to do some exercise in that. So here's an example over here. Key to the 5 organisms of living, key to the 5 kingdoms of living organisms. Okay, do the organisms have a definite nucleus? So then you answer the question, yes. Then you go to question 2. All right. So then if no, then it's kingdom Monera. Right. So then you say yes, go to question 2. So then let's go to question 2. If it's yes, is the organism multicellular or unicellular? All right. Then if it is unicellular, then kingdom Protista. Okay. So if you say that it's unicellular, if the key identifies that it's unicellular, then kingdom Protista. All right. If it is multicellular, then go to question 3. So can you see at this point, kingdom Protista, okay, was your identification, all right, or it led you to kingdom Protista if the question that you are answering was unicellular. Then it's done, right? You don't have to go any further, right? But if it was not unicellular and instead it was multicellular, then you have to continue to question 3. So it's a key that guides you to a conclusion, right? Or to a finding a living organism. So if it was multicellular, then go to question 3. So if it was unicellular, then we need to go to the next question. So then, is the organism autotrophic? So then, if it is yes, then it's kingdom Plantae. Then you stop there. You don't have to go any further, right? But if no, then go to question. If it was not kingdom Plantae, then go to question 4. Then you will go to question 4, follow the key in the questions. Does the organism digest food outside its body and then take it in? Right? Then you answer according to what's given to you. Yes. If it's yes, then it's kingdom fungi. If no, then it's kingdom Animalia. Okay. But can you see this is the end of the key, because now if they say no, then it's kingdom Animalia. So then you've come to certain conclusions, okay? Starting from the very top, key to the 5 kingdoms of living organisms, right? So from the very first question, do the organisms have a definite nucleus? Yes, no. Can you see how it guided us to these 2? Kingdom fungi and kingdom Animalia. All right. We'll do some exercises on this, okay? So if you still are not sure, don't worry. Okay. Right, so the 2 classification systems that are more common. So we have 2 kingdom system, and then we can also have a 5 kingdom system. Right. So 2 kingdom system, it was developed by Carl Linnaeus. Remember we said Plantae and Animalia, and that was along the 18th century. However, there's a guy named R.H. Whittaker, okay, and he was much in the 20th century. He discovered that there can be a 5 kingdom system that we can use, all right? So that would be consistent of Monera, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and then Animalia, okay? And there's a reason why, which we'll uncover now. Okay. Alright, so let's first look at the 2 kingdom classification system. This is the classification system that Linnaeus developed. All organisms may be grouped as plants or animals, therefore 2 kingdoms are present. Plantae and Animalia. Okay. The following characteristics are used to classify organisms as plant or animals. So they needed to find out what makes a plant, right? And there's a few things that we need to know there. Plants are able to manufacture their own food by photosynthesis, right? So we know what is photosynthesis. So if an organism could photosynthesize, then we put them in the category of plants, because plants we know them to be make their own food, okay? And animals, however, are not able to, okay? And then why? Why are they not able to? So then they ask those type of questions. So plant cells are surrounded by an outer cellulose cell wall, okay? So, and while animal cells do not have cell walls, and what do they have instead? So for example, let's answer the question why. Why are animals unable to photosynthesize? Because they can't. Why are they not able to produce their own food? Okay, so animals use energy from the plants in order to use it for their functions. However, plants can make their own food by the means of sunlight, okay, which is a sustainable resource. We can't do that, okay? We can't make our own food. We are considered to rely on living organisms for our food, such as plants, okay? And plant cells have an outer cellulose cell wall, okay? So if you look at a plant cell has instead of having a cell membrane, okay, it has a cell wall to protect itself from, to protect basically what's found inside the plant, okay? So that is cell wall, but we'll look at that in more detail when we look at cells. And then animal cells do not have cell walls. We have cell membranes, okay, which is semi-permeable, but we'll also get into that when we look at cells. So then plants, another thing that scientists have discovered is that plants are sessile, okay? Or another word for sessile is sedentary. They are sessile creatures, meaning that they do not move, while animals are considered to be motile, right? So we are mobile, we can move. Plants cannot uproot themselves from one place to another, okay? Unfortunately, they just stay in one place, okay? So that is another limitation for animals, for plants in contrast to animals, okay? So that's how they've studied. They've asked all these features, they've asked all these questions, and these characteristics had to classify whether they are plants or animals. Okay. Right, so here we are again. This is just a flow diagram. All living organisms: kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia. Plantae able to make their own food, have cell walls in their drink. Kingdom Animalia can't make their own food, no cell wall, and they are motile. Instead, they have a cell membrane. Okay. Now let's look at the 5 kingdom classifications. So this guy named Robert Whittaker, he was in 1969. What he did was he discovered the 5 kingdom classification system. So he said his body structure. He basically placed it into 5 kingdoms based on certain characteristics. So these are the characteristics that he looked at, okay, which is a bit more specific according to living organisms. So number 1, he looked at their body structure, okay. So then he asked himself, are these living organisms unicellular or multicellular? So what do we mean by unicellular? Unicellular means it's an organism that is, uni means one, right? So it's just one cell, and basically that organism remains one cell their entire lifespan, okay? So they don't have, they just have one cell, so they are comprised of just one cell that basically, it stays one cell, right? And then multicellular refers to an organism that has many cells, and often these cells, they can become specialized, right? And they can develop, for example, in humans, these cells can then develop limbs, they can develop specialized cells such as neurons, which are found in your brain, and eventually, through that development of cells, they can eventually develop organs, okay? So we know that the development of cells. So everything starts with a cell, which is the unit of life, and then from a cell, cells can become many cells, and then we refer to a group of cells as tissues, and then from tissues become organs. Okay, they develop into organs, and then organs develop into systems, right? So then you have circulatory system, digestive system, respiratory system, etc. Okay, so that is also how he distinguished between unicellular organisms. So example of unicellular organisms would be like yeast cells from the phylum fungi, or from the kingdom fungi, from the kingdom fungi, which we'll look at later on. And then multicellular would be considered to be like animals, right? Like animals like mammals. We've looked at tigers now, we've looked at all of them. They are multicellular because they have specialized cells, and those specialized cells have different functions. Okay, so they have limbs to walk, they have a brain and eyes to see, etc. And then another thing was they looked at the cell structure, right? Did it have a nucleus, or was the nucleus absent? Okay, so if the organism has a nucleus, we call it it's a eukaryote. Okay, we're gonna look at the scientific names of that, and then if it does not have a cell structure, we refer to it as a prokaryote. Okay, if it does not have a nucleus, so prokaryote. There's no nucleus present. Okay, no nucleus, and then eukaryote, the nucleus is present there. Okay, so we're going to look at those terminology of presence or absence of nucleus, right? So those are the scientific terms. All right, so let's just continue. So, and then the third characteristic was the composition of cell wall. So what is the cell wall? For example, plant cells have a cell wall, right? And now what is the cell wall made up of? Okay, so often the cell wall is made up of a hard protective layer called chitin. Okay, and however, if it has no cell wall, what is the cell membrane? So if you're looking at animals, what are the cell membranes of animals made up of? Okay, so that was the composition of the cell wall. So you get cellulose, or you get chitin, and various other compositions of the cell wall. And then motility is referring to whether the animal is immobile or mobile. And then number 5, mode of nutrition. How does it obtain its food? Okay, so we know that plants are autotrophic. We looked at from the previous topics that we've covered, we know now what autotrophic means, right? An organism that can make its own food, right? It doesn't need to, and another word for autotrophic is produces. Okay, and however, if you're looking at heterotrophic living organisms, such as animals that need to feed on other organisms in order for their energy, in order to obtain food. Okay, and then lastly, the method of reproduction. Okay, so there's quite a few ways in which animals can go through reproduction, and not just animals, plants, and also even microorganisms. All right, so from the beginning in the year, we learned about the germ theory, right? That microorganisms are found within the air. We can't see them with the naked eye. All right, so then some important terminology that we need to know. The autotrophic organisms are those that are able to manufacture their own food by photosynthesis. So that is autotrophic. Heterotrophic are those organisms that are unable to manufacture their own food. So they are heterotrophic. And organisms that live off dead and decaying matter are called saprophytes. Okay, so they live off of the decomposed material Yeah, so we call them saprophytes, right? And then decomposers are those organisms that feed on dead material or the waste of living organisms, okay? Organisms that are made up of only one cell are called unicellular, as we've already mentioned, okay? And multicellular are those organisms that are made up of many cells, okay? Many cells and only one cell. Okay, so these are the terminology that we must know in order to, because it's going to be in your exams. Okay, so you must also pay attention to the spelling. So, example, saprophytes. Okay, and you must be able to identify them, especially in section A. Okay, so these are all living organisms can be divided into two groups according to their cell structure. So, in other words, they can be prokaryote or eukaryote. So, the cell structure, remember I said prokaryotes are all organisms with cells that do not have a true nuclei. Okay, so true nuclei just means that the nuclei or the nuclei is plural for a nucleus. Okay, so many nuclei, and then a single nucleus. Okay, so if they don't have a true nucleus, then they are considered to be prokaryotes. Okay, and the nucleus, the function of the nucleus is that it houses the genetic material of an organism. Okay, a true nucleus is a nucleus that is surrounded by a nuclear membrane. And yeah, this is also very important. Okay. A true nucleus has a membrane around it. So, a nucleus that has a nuclear membrane, and then it can also have a nuclear envelope. Okay, so prokaryotes are organisms which cells their organelles are not membrane bound. Okay, that's what we mean by prokaryotes. So they don't have a true nucleus, and all the organelles in the cell are not membrane bound. Okay, prokaryotes. Common example of prokaryotes are bacteria. Okay, bacteria they don't have a true nucleus, and the organelles found in their cells are not membrane bound. Now, a true nucleus, no true organelles occur in the cytoplasm. Okay, cytoplasm refers to the space in the cell. Okay, that is filled with lots of organelles as well. And then eukaryotes, however, are organisms with cells that have true nuclei present. Okay, so the organelles in eukaryotes are all bound by membranes. Okay, so they have like a membrane around them. All right. For example, if you look at a cell, and then this cell has let me draw another one. This cell, and then it has a cell membrane. Okay, and then this cell membrane has a nucleus. Okay. And then the nucleus is bounded by a membrane as well. Okay. And then it has, for example, if you're looking at mitochondria, then the mitochondria has a membrane as well. Okay, so all the organelles are bounded, right? Even the ribosomes. So we have ribosomes. This is the mitochondria. Okay. You guys need to forgive my drawing over here. It's just simple drawings. Plenty of images that I can show you. So, and then this would be a nucleus. And then you have the nuclear membrane. Okay, because all of the organelles in the cytoplasm are basically covered with a membrane, okay, or surrounded with a membrane. All right, so true organelles occur in the cytoplasm. All right, so here we can even make a a diagram, a flow diagram, stating where living organisms come from. So they are either prokaryotes or eukaryotes, and they can either be unicellular. So if they are prokaryotes, then automatically they can be unicellular, and then eukaryotes, however, can be unicellular and multicellular, and then unicellular organisms can be protists, and protists can, well, no, not be, and then multicellular can be fungi, plantae, and animalia. Okay, so prokaryotes, they end there, and they will have their own kingdom Monera. So right at the very end, these are all types of kingdoms. Okay, Monera, fungi, plantae, and animalia. Okay. Can you see here? Here's an example of a eukaryote. Okay, so it has a mitochondria. Here we have the nucleolus, and then the nucleus is present within the nuclear membrane. Okay, so and then we also have endoplasmic reticulum, which is the ER ribosomes, and then so that is a eukaryote, right? Mitochondria, all of the cells are membrane bound. However, you have a prokaryote, which consists of a nucleoid. Now, can you see that this nucleus houses genetic material? However, it's not bounded by a membrane. Okay, so it's free living. The genetic material are freely living within the cytoplasm. And then you have a ribosome. The ribosomes are also not membrane bound, and it has a cell membrane, but it also has a cell wall, and it has a flagellum and a capsule around it. Okay, so you can have a slime capsule over there. So that is how they differ. So prokaryote, the organelles in the cytoplasm are not membrane bound, and eukaryote, the organelles in the cytoplasm are membrane bound. Okay, here's another image, displaying just that. Okay, all right. Okay, so 5 kingdom classification system and their development. Okay, just want to see now. All right. Okay, so these organisms are separated in the following way. Okay, we've discussed into prokaryotes and eukaryotes. All the prokaryotes were placed into one kingdom Monera. Okay, so that is the kingdom for prokaryotes. It's kingdom Monera, right? Because R.H. Whitaker discovered that organisms, they are also microorganisms, and we know that there's many bacteria that we can't see with the naked eye. Okay, so then it became more developed, unlike Carl Linnaeus and Aristotle, who just came up with 2 broad kingdoms such as Animalia and Plantae. So then he further developed that because he understood, while he discovered that there are microorganisms in the air that we cannot see. So then the classification system had to be further developed in order for prokaryotes and eukaryotes to arise. Okay, so then it later on help us understand the cellular structure. So in this case, kingdom Monera involves microorganisms, specifically bacteria, and then also algae, okay, which is also, but algae can be microscopic, but they can also be microscopic, okay? So, but they all fall under this kingdom. So it's a kingdom on its own, and it's consistent of prokaryotes, okay? Organisms that don't have a true nucleus and don't have membrane-bound organelles. Okay, and then unicellular eukaryotes were placed under the kingdom Protista. Okay, so Protista is another organism, okay? So in this is another kingdom, and in this kingdom, you're looking at it can be microorganisms that are unicellular, right? So for example, yeast cells, and you also have cells such as protozoans, okay, which you guys are not familiar. But just remember that protista consists of organisms that they are eukaryotes, right? So they are eukaryotes, meaning that they do have a true nucleus, and that their organelles are membrane bound, and but they are unicellular, right? So they are not multicellular. So that's how they have been classified. Okay, so that would be kingdom Monera and then kingdom Protista. Then we have multicellular eukaryotes. Okay, multicellular eukaryotes are placed into 3 kingdoms. So the remaining 3 kingdoms, they are multicellular. All of them are multicellular, and they are eukaryotes. So the main 3 kingdoms are kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia, and kingdom Fungi, right? So kingdom Plantae is then given its own category, and it's not part of kingdom Monera and Protista. Why? Because Plantae, these organisms, they have plant-like characteristics, but they haven't been identified as plants because most of them are microorganisms. However, they share features of Plantae, such as they can be photosynthetic. Some of them can actually be photosynthetic. Others can, however, be parasitic, and which they harm their host, or they depend on the host for food. Okay, so then Plantae does not form part of kingdom Monera and kingdom Protista. All right, so Plantae is made up of autotrophic organisms only. Okay, they are made up of autotrophic organisms. And then kingdom Animalia is made up of heterotrophic organisms that ingest food and digest it inside their own bodies. Okay, so they are heterotrophic. So that is Animalia on its own. Okay, and then you have kingdom Fungi. Now fungi is a very interesting kingdom. These are also heterotrophic organisms, but they obtain food by secreting enzymes into the food and then absorbing the digested food. Right. So if you think, a common example for fungi would be bread mold, okay, or rhizopus. Right. So what they do is, for example, when bread starts to grow all these molds, right? Basically, these molds are secreting enzymes. Enzymes are basically proteins that break down substrate. So in this case, for example, if you think of bread, then they would break down the substrates that's found in the bread, and then basically they will absorb the digested food, right? And they'll digest the food. So then basically the mold is growing on the bread, right? By releasing all these enzymes, okay? And many of the organisms found in this kingdom are decomposers, okay? So decomposers, they feed on dead organic matter, okay? So that is fungi, and other fungi like mushrooms, and so there's quite a variety of so that's why it's kingdom on its own, because there's a lot of organisms that fall under this kingdom. Okay. Right. So then prokaryote. Okay. So here's another diagram. Prokaryote. They have no true nuclei. Okay. These are all living organisms. So they can be prokaryotic. They can be eukaryotic. From eukaryotic, they can be unicellular. And they can be kingdom. Then you can have kingdom Protista, right? Remember I said kingdom Protista, they are unicellular. Prokaryotes, they don't have true nuclei, so they fall under kingdom Monera. They have a kingdom on their own. Eukaryotes, they have true nuclei. They can be multicellular, and they can be autotrophic, and then we refer to them as kingdom Plantae. And then from multicellular, they can be heterotrophic. Heterotrophic means the food is digested and taken in, and then they can have their own kingdom Fungi, and then all food is taken in, then digested. That would be kingdom Animalia. So these are the 5 kingdoms that has been developed so far from the studies of R.H. Whitaker, okay, Robert Whitaker. So now we have 5 fully developed 5 kingdom classification that is used today as we speak, okay? And we're using it to classify all organisms according to the 5 kingdoms. So Kingdom Monera, so let's just look at all of them quickly. Kingdom Monera is made up of bacteria and the blue-green algae, okay? So do you know what algae are? So algae, they can be macroscopic. So seaweeds, you would often find it in the oceans. You can also find it in moist areas such as on the rims of your swimming pools, or but in very damp areas. They're often present in very damp areas. Algae, okay, and then some of them can be they fall under the Kingdom Monera, okay, and bacteria also fall under Kingdom Monera. Bacteria are unicellular and microscopic. So they are unicellular and you can't see them, and they have a cell wall. So a similarity they have with plants is that they have a cell wall, okay? Some bacteria are colonial, meaning that while they occur in groups, each bacteria functions on its own, okay? So that means that they can make up their own colonies, etc. And bacteria are prokaryotes, right? So they don't have true nucleus, and their organelles are not membrane bound. So some bacteria are autotrophic, therefore they are able to manufacture their own food via photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. So some bacteria, however, are autotrophic, okay? They can make their own food, but they don't fall under the kingdom of Plantae because they are too different in order to fall within that category or that kingdom. And they can also be chemosynthetic, meaning that they make their own food with the help of chemicals that are in the environment, right? So that is Kingdom Monera. Here we have a typical bacterial cell, okay? And this is the cell structure of it, okay? So they have a cell wall and they have a capsule outside, they have ribosomes, they have they have a pilus, so these things help them to attach and make up colonies so they can attach to other microorganisms, and then they can actually feed on these microorganisms. And then they have a cell membrane, they have a nucleoid. So this nucleoid is not a nucleus because it's not membrane bound. Okay, so this genetic material that you see over here are just moving freely around the cytoplasm. And then they have a flagellum that helps them with movement. Okay, so these cells are considered to be, they can move. Okay, so they are mobile with the help of this tail over here. And then, so most bacteria are heterotrophic. Some of the heterotrophic bacteria are parasitic. So that's why you can often get sick because of bacteria, and they can harm you, right? And another thing is that antibiotics are often used for bacteria, okay? And they can also be saprotrophic, or another word for saprotrophic means that they feed on dead organic matter, okay? Reproduction occurs sexually or through binary fission. So binary fission is a form of asexual reproduction, okay? So there's no sexual process that takes place, meaning that the egg cell and there's no egg cell or sperm cell that fuse, right? So basically binary fission is just them going through the process of mitosis, okay? They are basically replicating. And then reproduction, sexual reproduction is when the egg and the sperm fertilize, when the bacterial cell has egg cells and then they get fertilized somehow, right? So they can have both. They can reproduce sexually or asexually. Okay. Right, so here's an example of that. Okay, so here you have the chromosome that's found in the cell, DNA replication occurs, and then it starts to, the cell starts to split by means of mitosis, okay? And then cytokinesis will occur, then you'll have two separate cells. So basically it has reproduced, it made a copy of itself, okay? And so binary fission, an asexual type of reproduction where DNA is copied and the cell splits, okay? So they're basically going through the process of mitosis, and we call that process for prokaryotes. They go through the process of binary fission. All right, here's another example of that, all right? Basically one cell becomes two cells. In this, so then let's look at kingdom Protista. Kingdom Protista, in this kingdom, some organisms may be microscopic or macroscopic. So it means that they can be seen with the naked eye, or they cannot be seen with the naked eye. So they are all eukaryotes. So they all have a true nucleus and all their organelles are membrane bound. Protists are not identical in appearance. Okay. So they have variation, they can differ from one another. They also differ in the way in which they obtain their food. Therefore, they are divided into three groups based on nutrition and appearance. So these three groups are slime molds, okay? So slime molds are fungus-like organisms, okay? So they don't fall under the kingdom of fungi, but slime molds are actually, they look like fungi, all right, or fungus. They are fungus-like, okay, but they are not. They are actually protists, okay. And then we have protozoans, animal-like organisms, unicellular, and they are heterotrophic, okay. Yeah. So, and some of them can actually have symbiotic relationships with other organisms. And then you also have algae. So algae are plant-like, okay. Algae, they are plant-like and they are autotrophic. Okay, so these are the groups to which they are divided into, alright? So yeah, here you have slime molds, here you have algae, okay? I think you guys have seen that before. They are often found in damp areas. And slime molds they normally grow on leaves, and then basically they obtain their food from dead organic matter. Okay, here we have seaweed, kelp, and then here you have these microorganisms, okay, that are animal-like, that have animal-like features. Okay, kingdom fungi, three groups can be distinguished: mushrooms, yeast, and mold. So some have plant-like features and some are different from plants. So all fungi are considered to be heterotrophic. Some are parasitic, okay, while others are septotrophic. So parasitic means that they harm the host in order to obtain their food, okay, or they enter a host in order to basically obtain their own food. So fungi may be unicellular and multicellular, so they can be either of the two. The reproduction can occur sexually or asexually. They all produce spores. Now, some produce spores in sporangia, and some produce spores in club-shaped structures. Okay, these structures are usually found within the cap-like fruiting bodies. Okay, so fruiting bodies, I'll show you guys images now. But basically, spores normally comes from the male organism, okay, and it will spread its spores. So spores are another word for seeds, but they're not called seeds, okay, because they fall in the kingdom of fungi, so they are not plants. They cannot consider to be plants. And some produce spores in sporangia. So sporangia are these like capsules that contains the a sporangia is basically these capsules that contain the spores, okay? And these structures are usually found within the so yeah, like I said, fruiting bodies. And so mushrooms, for example, okay, they have those characteristics. Others produce the spores in sac-like structures, like penicillium. So penicillium is basically a microorganism that is used for antibiotics. Okay, so then basically what scientists have done, they have used penicillium, which is the microorganism, and they have developed into a drug because a guy named what's his name again? I forgot his name, but he basically produced a drug, okay, an antibiotic to basically kill bacteria. Because upon accident, he discovered that penicillium, which was this microorganism that was killing all the bacteria around it. Okay, so that's the interesting thing about penicillium. All right. Yeah, so penicillium is like a fungus, okay, that has been used for killing off bacteria. Right. So yeah, here you can see it. Here we have mushrooms, different types of mushrooms, and yeah. So that is, in summary, that's kingdom fungi. Okay. Then we have kingdom plantae. So plants are multicellular, have cell walls of cellulose. Their cell walls are made up of cellulose, which is a polysaccharide, okay, which is like a carbohydrate. And then reproduction is asexual, so by means of spores, and sexual by means of gametes. Gametes are refers to your sperm and your egg cell, okay? Spores, they are not considered to be egg or sperm cell, so that is asexual. The plant kingdom is divided into 4 divisions. So you have bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. So some plants do not have vascular tissue. Vascular tissue just means that they don't have transporting tissues such as like the xylem and the phloem, which you guys will learn about later on in the year. These plants are called thallus plants because they do not have true roots, stems, and leaves. So any plant that does not have true roots and stems and leaves, they are considered to be a thallus plant, okay? So they have other structures that refer to as rhizoids, or so it's not similar to a normal plant, okay? And then they have root-like structures called, so yeah, thallus plants have root-like structures called rhizoids. So the rhizoids would be the root-like structures that would absorb nutrition from the soil, and stem-like structures, and they have stem-like structures and leaf-like structures. However, those stems are not really stems, and those leaves are not really leaves, leaf-like structure. Leaves, if you are referring to a plant, okay? So here we have bryophytes. So a common example of bryophytes is moss, and then we have pteridophytes. Pteridophytes are ferns, okay? You might have seen them in the school. There's quite a few of them. And then you have gymnosperms. So these are those type of pine trees, for example, and also the trees that you can just look at outside. Those are gymnosperms. And then you have angiosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants. So all your flowers that you see, they fall under the category of angiosperms. Okay, all right. So, okay. So these organisms, so kingdom Animalia. These organisms occupy a variety of habitats. They are multicellular. They do not have cell walls around their cells. They do not have chlorophyll. Okay, chlorophyll is basically pigment that's found in plants. Okay, that gives them their green color, and they are heterotrophic. There are huge differences in appearances. They can be subdivided into vertebrates and invertebrates. Remember, I said vertebrates are animals that have a backbone, and invertebrates are animals that do not have a backbone. Okay, So here's images of that. Okay. So terminology. What is biodiversity? The wide range of species and the number of organisms making up each species within communities referred to as biodiversity. Indigenous are species that occur naturally in a certain area. The species are brought into an area that are called alien or exotic species, right? Sometimes species are indigenous to a particular area, but they are found nowhere else in the world. That is called endemic species. So we've done this before. An endemism describes the number and range of species endemic to a particular area. And biodiversity hotspots, internationally recognized places of high diversity and rich endemism are known as biodiversity hotspots. And then classification refers to the grouping and sorting of things according to similarities and differences, as we've discussed. Taxonomy refers to the science of naming and classifying a wide range of living things. Okay. Colonial organisms are unicellular organisms that live in a group, but each organism functions on its own. Okay. Vascular plants are plants that have vascular tissue, transporting tissue basically. And thallus plants that do not have are plants that do not have vascular tissue. So they don't have roots, they don't have stems, and they don't have leaves. Okay. And that is basically it. Okay. So I want you guys to go and watch this video because I've recorded it, and then use it to revise. And if you have questions, then you can ask them in class. Okay. But we're gonna do some exercises, and this was used in order to save time because we need to finish. We need to start with our next topic, which is history of life. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and take notes while watching this video, so that you guys can always refer back to it. Okay, yeah, but that's all for today, and I will see you guys next time. All right, cheers.